Audrey Griffin vanished under mysterious circumstances in the hills of Rishikesh. What began as a spiritual escape ended in a brutal murder. Kaviraj Malhotra, the revered yoga guru with a fabricated identity, and Rohit Sharma, a quiet trekking guide with a violent past, soon emerged as central figures in a case that would shock the nation. As Inspector Ramesh Iyer and cyber expert Naira Shekawat dug deeper, they uncovered a disturbing web of manipulation, trauma, and hidden crimes, exposing the sinister truth behind a retreat that promised peace but delivered something far more dangerous. Audrey Griffin had always been a vibrant presence online, her Instagram flooded with sunlit beaches, mountain trails, and cheerful selfies from remote corners of India. A British-Indian travel blogger, she had become a familiar name in the backpacking and wellness community. With over 150,000 followers, her posts inspired many to explore India's spiritual side. In April, she announced her next destination, Rishikesh. Known for its yoga retreats and peaceful riverbanks, it seemed like a natural stop on her wellness journey. She checked into a secluded retreat called Ananda Path, hidden in the forest just beyond the city's edge. The place promised digital detox, daily meditation, and personal healing. Audrey welcomed the escape. She posted her last video on a Tuesday morning. It showed her smiling by the Ganges, describing the cleansing effect of silence. By that evening, her phone went offline. At first, nobody panicked. Audrey had taken digital breaks before. But by the third day of silence, concern grew. Her best friend back in Goa tried calling repeatedly. No answer. When even scheduled emails to sponsors went unread, a formal missing person report was filed with Uttarakhand police. Local authorities visited Ananda Path the following morning. Staff claimed Audrey had informed them she was cutting her stay short and planned to visit a nearby ashram. But her room told a different story. Her backpack lay untouched, her passport zipped inside a hidden pouch. A journal rested on her bedside table, open to a half-finished entry dated the night she disappeared. Even stranger, her camera and tripod were neatly set up near the window. It was as if she had intended to stay longer. Inspector Ramesh Iyer took over the case. A seasoned officer known for cracking several complex disappearances in the northern belt. He immediately found the story suspicious. He ordered a sweep of the retreat security footage. Oddly, many clips from the night Audrey vanished were missing. When asked, the retreat's manager insisted there had been a power failure. Iyer didn't buy it. The facility ran on solar backup standard in isolated wellness resorts. He sent technicians to recover any deleted data. The breakthrough came not from inside the retreat, but just outside it. A local man, out on his early morning walk with 2 stray dogs, discovered a maroon scarf tangled in the bushes near a narrow hiking path. It was soaked in what looked like dried blood. Police confirmed it belonged to Audrey. Photos on her Instagram showed her wearing the same scarf just days earlier. Forensic analysis detected traces of human blood. The wooded area where the scarf was found was dense and barely accessible, raising suspicion that someone familiar with the terrain had gone through great effort to hide any evidence. The discovery escalated the case to potential foul play. The media picked up the story. "Missing tourist in Rishikesh," the headline screamed. Audrey's image flashed across TV channels and news websites, fueling public concern. International interest surged as British authorities reached out to Indian officials, offering support. Inspector Iyer began scrutinizing everyone who had been in close contact with Audrey. Staff logs, visitor registrations, and workshop schedules were pulled. That's when Kaviraj Malhotra's name stood out. He wasn't listed as a retreat staff member, but several attendees mentioned him as a guest speaker. He was well known in the area, a spiritual guru with a reputation for helping troubled souls. But the more Iyer looked into him, the more gaps he found in Kaviraj's story. There were no government records under that name prior to 2018. A search into passport records hinted at something even more curious. Kaviraj had no international travel history, nor any linked family. He had appeared in Rishikesh suddenly, buying land and opening the retreat with private funding no one could trace. As night fell on the 5th day since Audrey's disappearance, the retreat's forested surroundings were swarming with police and dogs trained to track human scent. Everyone at the retreat was being questioned, but no one had clear answers. Only whispers lingered among the trees, rumors of a healer who knew how to make people vanish. Audrey Griffin was no longer just a missing traveler. Her story had turned into a mystery, tangled in secrets deeper than anyone could have expected. Kaviraj Malhotra was a man who seemed too perfect to doubt. Always dressed in flowing linen robes, he carried himself with the calm demeanor of a man at peace with the universe. His followers spoke of him with reverence, calling him Guruji and crediting him for transforming their lives. He ran meditation circles, held silent retreats, and offered spiritual counseling to the broken and lost. But behind the serene smile was a man who didn't officially exist before 2018. When Inspector Ramesh Iyer dug into his identity, he hit an immediate wall: no school records, no driving license history, no known relatives. It was as if Kaviraj Malhotra had been born the moment he stepped into Rishikesh. The investigation took a darker turn when an old photo surfaced. A retired police officer from Kerala contacted Iyer after watching a news segment about Audrey's disappearance. He claimed Kaviraj resembled a man once known as Vishal Natal, a suspect in an unsolved case involving a young French tourist named Elise Beaumont. Elise had died by falling from a cliff during the trek in Wayanad. At the time, her death was ruled accidental, but the officer had always been suspicious. Elise had been traveling with a man she met at a yoga retreat, someone who vanished the day after her body was found. That man, the officer now believed, was Vishal Natal. Running facial recognition across older case files confirmed the match. Kaviraj and Vishal were indeed the same person. Vishal had changed his name, grown a beard, and disappeared into the spiritual crowd that flooded Rishikesh each year. He had built a new identity from scratch, one based on trust, wellness, and healing. But Audrey's case threatened to unravel that carefully constructed facade. Inspector Iyer confronted Kaviraj at the retreat. The guru maintained his innocence, claiming he had never met Audrey personally and was merely invited as a guest speaker by the retreat's management. But his story quickly began to fall apart. Phone records showed that Kaviraj had messaged Audrey on 2 separate occasions, both times through an encrypted app. One of the messages was sent just hours before she vanished. A search warrant was issued for Kaviraj's personal quarters on the retreat property. What the police found raised immediate red flags. Behind a false wooden panel in his bedroom wall, officers discovered a set of small, labeled jars. Each contained hair strands, jewelry, or personal trinket souvenirs, perhaps. One necklace was confirmed by Audrey's sister to be Audrey's. Her social media photos showed her wearing it in the days before her disappearance. Still, the most damning discovery was a hidden drawer inside a locked metal trunk. Inside was a passport with Vishal Natal's name and photo. Alongside it, several pages from what looked like a torn diary were found. The entries were cryptic but disturbing references to purification, unworthy energies, and those who must return to the earth. Kaviraj was taken into custody for questioning. Though calm on the outside, he refused to answer most of the investigators' questions. His lawyers intervened, demanding his immediate release due to a lack of formal charges. Despite growing pressure from the public and Audrey's family, the police were stuck. Without a body or direct evidence linking him to a murder, they could only hold him temporarily. Meanwhile, public opinion was shifting. News outlets began portraying Kaviraj as a spiritual conman. Former guests at his retreat began to share disturbing stories, instances of psychological manipulation, forced isolation, and veiled threats disguised as teachings. One woman posted anonymously about how she fled the retreat after Kaviraj told her she was too impure to continue the course. Back at the retreat, staff began to distance themselves from their former mentor. Some claimed they were unaware of his real identity. Others whispered about strange disappearances in past years, tourists who came for healing and never returned. No one had dared speak up until now, with Audrey's body still unaccounted for and Kaviraj walking free under surveillance. The case teetered between accusation and silence. Inspector Iyer knew he was dealing with someone far more dangerous than he first realized, a man who hid darkness behind mantras and silence behind truth. The real question now wasn't just what happened to Audrey, but how many others had met a similar fate before her. 10 days after Audrey Griffin was last seen, a breakthrough came from a place no one expected. A group of local schoolboys, venturing into the hills behind the retreat to collect firewood, stumbled upon a disturbing sight near a dried-out waterfall. Amid the moss-covered rocks and scattered leaves, they noticed what looked like a piece of fabric partially buried under loose stones. When they pulled it free, they were met with the unmistakable stench of decay. They immediately alerted the local authorities. The police arrived swiftly, led by Inspector Ramesh Iyer and his team. A forensic crew began to carefully excavate the site. Buried in a shallow depression was the partially decomposed body of a woman. Her clothes matched the ones Audrey had been seen wearing in her last social media post. The discovery sent a chill across the community. The body was transported to Dehradun for forensic analysis, and within days, dental records confirmed what many had feared. It was indeed Audrey Griffin. The autopsy revealed troubling details. Audrey had suffered blunt force trauma to the side of her head and had bruises on her arms, suggesting a struggle. There were also signs of her body being dragged before burial. Although decomposition had set in, forensic analysts managed to recover microscopic traces of a unique type of soil embedded in her clothes, soil that did not match the location she was found in. It indicated she had been moved post-mortem. The attention of the investigators turned toward individuals who had knowledge of the forest routes around the retreat. Among those who stood out was Rohit Sharma, a 29-year-old local trekking guide who had known Audrey from a previous visit. Rohit had a difficult past. His father was a notorious poacher, and his teenage years were spent navigating the jungle terrain. He was known to be intensely private and quick-tempered. When questioned, he claimed he hadn't seen Audrey in weeks and had nothing to do with the retreat. However, something didn't sit right with Inspector Iyer. A background check revealed that Rohit had once been expelled from a nature camp for aggressive behavior toward a female tourist. The suspicion deepened when a search of his small hillside cottage turned up a dusty camera bag beneath a floorboard. Inside was Audrey's missing camera. The memory card had been forcefully removed and was nowhere to be found. Rohit insisted he had found the bag abandoned on a trail and planned to return it, but hadn't yet gotten the chance. With Audrey's body recovered, the scope of the investigation widened. Digital forensics expert Neera Shekhawat was called in to examine Audrey's online presence. She managed to recover deleted backup files from Audrey's cloud account. Among the files were several vlogs she hadn't posted, one of which showed her talking late at night in her room, discussing someone she felt uneasy around. The video didn't mention a name, but she described a man who had too many eyes in too many places, and whose energy made her want to run. In one particularly blurry video clip from her phone, recorded just 2 nights before she vanished, a hooded figure could be seen passing outside her window. The timing matched surveillance footage gaps at the retreat. A voice recording extracted from her smartwatch revealed her breathing heavily and whispering about following someone into the woods. The name she mentioned almost inaudibly was Kaviraj. This single piece of evidence connected Kaviraj Malhotra more directly to the crime. But the situation remained complex. Rohit Sharma had Audrey's camera, and forensic tests showed his fingerprints on her scarf, the same scarf. Found bloodied in the bushes. Yet he had no clear motive, and his movements during the time of Audrey's disappearance were inconsistent. His boots, seized during questioning, had traces of soil that didn't match the burial site, but did match a location near the retreat's private meditation grove, a place Kaviraj was known to frequent in the evenings. The investigators now faced a chilling possibility. Audrey's death might have involved more than one person. A potential collaboration, or at least a cover-up. Both men had secrets, and both had access to the isolated trails that wound through the dense Rishikesh forest. One knew how to manipulate the mind. The other knew how to disappear into the wild. Audrey had unknowingly stepped into a place where darkness wore many faces and only one was about to be unmasked. As public pressure mounted and the media frenzy intensified, the police were left with fragments of evidence, two prime suspects, and a growing sense that Audrey Griffin's death was more complex than initially believed. Inspector Ramesh Iyer and his team pressed forward with a renewed focus, determined to expose the truth that remained carefully hidden beneath layers of manipulation, secrecy, and silence. The forensic leads pointed in two conflicting directions, and both Kaviraj Malhotra and Rohit Sharma remained under scrutiny. Nira Shekhawat, the cyber investigator assigned to the case, turned her attention to digital footprints that hadn't been fully explored. While Audrey's primary phone had been recovered in her room, a secondary device, one she used solely for vlogging, was still missing. However, through cloud synchronization, Nira located metadata logs that placed the device at the retreat's meditation grove around midnight, just hours before Audrey vanished. The timestamp overlapped with another piece of evidence. Security footage, previously corrupted, had been partially restored. In a few frames, Kaviraj could be seen walking out of the main building and toward the same grove, carrying what appeared to be a rolled mat. But this time, he wasn't alone. A second figure trailed him in the shadows, taller, broader, and wearing a dark hoodie. Based on silhouette and height, it closely resembled Rohit. The question now wasn't just who killed Audrey, but whether it had been a coordinated act, a coincidence, or something far more sinister. The search for more definitive links led the team back to the retreat. A complete forensic sweep was ordered, and it was during this inspection that officers stumbled upon a small trapdoor in the floor of an unused storage room, hidden beneath stacked yoga cushions. Inside was a narrow staircase leading to a long-forgotten basement. The air was stale and heavy. Shelves lined the walls, filled with dusty incense boxes, broken statues, and old books. But in one corner stood a locked metal cabinet. Once forced open, the contents of the cabinet sent a wave of silence through the room. It held personal belongings, bracelets, passport photocopies, lipstick tubes, a broken watch. None of the items had ever been reported missing, but they clearly belonged to women. In total, 23 separate objects were catalogued. When photos of the contents were shown to the families of past guests, at least 6 were identified as having belonged to women who had mysteriously left early or dropped off contact. After visiting Ananda Path over the past 3 years, this discovery shifted the case dramatically. Kaviraj's retreat now seemed less like a spiritual sanctuary and more like a front for something more disturbing. It was no longer just about Audrey. She may have been the latest in a chain of disappearances. Still, the evidence against Rohit couldn't be ignored. Soil samples on Audrey's socks didn't match either the grove or the burial site. Instead, they matched a high-ridge trail known only to locals. This led the investigators to theorize that Audrey may have fled the retreat, perhaps after a confrontation, and tried to escape into the forest, only to cross paths with someone else, possibly Rohit. His knowledge of the terrain, his suspicious possession of her camera, and now the matching soil patterns on his boots and her clothing painted a worrying picture. The psychological profiles of both men were sent to a behavioral Analyst in Delhi. The results were chilling. Kaviraj showed signs of narcissistic delusion obsessed with control, image, and the idea of cleansing those who challenged his authority. Rohit, on the other hand, presented traits of reactive violence, likely stemming from childhood trauma, and was known to lash out under stress. The deeper the investigation went, the more it appeared that Audrey's death wasn't a simple case of premeditated murder. It was the result of a twisted sequence of events fueled by ego, isolation, and deep-rooted psychological damage. While Kaviraj manipulated the minds of the vulnerable, Rohit acted from impulsive fear and aggression. Their paths had intersected at the wrong time. With Audrey caught in the middle, Inspector Iyer stood before a complex puzzle with every piece soaked in ambiguity. There were still too many questions. Who struck the fatal blow? Was Audrey trying to escape? Did she uncover something she wasn't meant to see? And most disturbingly, was there anyone else involved whose presence still lingered in the shadows? The truth felt just within reach, but still out of grasp. The final breakthrough came from an unexpected place, a small smartwatch backup stored on Audrey's forgotten email account. As part of her digital routine, Audrey had configured her watch to auto-sync recordings and health data to a secondary cloud service, one that hadn't been accessed during the initial stages of the investigation. Nara Shekhawat stumbled upon it while double-checking all linked accounts. Within the files was a single voice note, recorded less than 3 hours before Audrey's death. Her voice was breathless, cautious, and full of fear. In the recording, Audrey described witnessing a disturbing incident near the meditation grove. She had followed someone, presumably Kaviraj, into the woods after suspecting unusual activity. She mentioned seeing him dragging what looked like a cloth sack, possibly containing something heavy. The tone in her voice was one of growing realization. She didn't name anyone directly, but she expressed deep unease, saying, "If something happens to me, it's because I saw something I wasn't supposed to." This voice note was the missing piece. With it, the authorities finally had a credible timeline placing Audrey in danger and linking Kaviraj to secretive behavior the night she vanished. But the voice note also revealed something else, a short, distant sound of another person's voice, unintelligible but definitely male in the background. That voice was not Kaviraj's. Sound analysts later confirmed that likely belonged to Rohit. Sharma. This shifted the narrative once again. Both men had been in the same area that night, both linked by proximity to Audrey just before her death. But the motive remained the most elusive part of the puzzle. Why would either of them want to harm her? The answer surfaced in the form of a series of deleted messages recovered from Audrey's cloud backups. She had been keeping notes about her experiences at the retreat, including subtle signs that she believed women were being manipulated into silence by Kaviraj. One of her last entries mentioned a confrontation. She had threatened to expose the retreat in an upcoming vlog, possibly breaking the serene image that Kaviraj had carefully curated. This could have made her a threat. Meanwhile, Rohit's involvement became clearer when police discovered an old hunting knife buried in a field behind his cottage. Traces of blood were found on its edge, later confirmed to be Audrey's through DNA testing. Under interrogation, Rohit confessed, but his version of events added a dark twist to the story. According to him, Audrey had indeed left the retreat late at night after a confrontation with Kaviraj. She had run into the forest, terrified, and stumbled upon Rohit, who was camping nearby. She pleaded for help, but Rohit, already on edge from past trauma and fear of outsiders, panicked. He claimed she had accused him of following her, and in a moment of blind rage he struck her. Only later did he realize what he had done. To cover his actions, he moved the body, buried it near the waterfall, and disposed of the camera. He didn't confess earlier out of fear that no one would believe him. While his confession did not absolve Kaviraj, it did shift legal focus. Kaviraj was charged with multiple counts of obstruction of justice, identity fraud, and psychological abuse related to the women who had attended his retreats. He denied direct involvement in Audrey's death, but was held responsible for creating the circumstances that led to it. Forensic teams continued to investigate the other suspicious disappearances tied to him, some of which now looked more like calculated exploitation than spiritual healing. Rohit was charged with second-degree murder and sentenced after a swift trial. His history, psychological condition, and lack of premeditation factored into his sentencing, but the brutality of the act ensured a long prison term. As the media frenzy faded, Audrey Griffin's name became a symbol of vigilance. Her story ignited global discussions on the dangers hidden within spiritual retreats and the false masks worn by those in power. A memorial fund was created in her name to support women traveling alone in remote parts of India. What had started as a peaceful journey for healing ended in tragedy. But Audrey's story brought light to the shadows others had ignored for too long. The mountains of Rishikesh, once seen as a sanctuary, now carried a silent reminder that darkness can live even in the most serene places. And sometimes, the most trusted faces are the ones hiding the deepest horrors.